Okay, 8th grade, today we're taking a look at Unit 2, Lesson 2A. The learning target says I can identify and write an equation of a linear function by using the slope and y-intercept. The do now says a cook uses 2 cups of flour for each ounce of butter in a recipe. Fill in the table of values and then you're going to graph the points. So let's first take a look at the table. So the X represents our butter, so I'm just going to label that butter. And the Y is our flour, so I'm going to label that flour. So if I'm not using any butter at all, I'm not going to use any flour because it tells us it's 2 cups for each ounce of butter. So if I'm using 2 for butter, my flour would be 4. If I have 4 for butter, how much flour would I have? So we can take a look at the butter to flour. I'm just going to write down here, if we have butter and flour, this is 2 and this is 4. Now if my butter is 4, what would my flour be? Okay, and you can use this ratio to help you continue filling in the rest of the table. So if your butter is 6, then what would your flour be? And this would be 12. Okay? So now it says another cook starts with 6 cups of flour before adding any butter. So if X is our butter and Y is our flour, we have 6 cups of flour before we even do anything with our butter. So now, if we look at the previous table, if our flour, when we were at 2, was 4, we need to also incorporate that additional 6 cups that we started with, so this would be 10. Then our 4, if we follow that same pattern, would be 14. So now we're going to take both of our tables and put them on our graph. We want to make sure that we label our x-axis, so that's at the bottom. This is our butter. Up the side here, this is our flour on the y-axis. Now the number that you're counting by, or your scale, look at the numbers that you are using. Counting by 2s would work here, so I'm going to start at 0. I'll skip a line because I have enough space. So I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and that should cover it for the butter. Now let's look at the y. I'm going to continue to count by 2s and I'm going to skip a line. So this would be 0, skip a line, this is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. So now I'll graph our first table in purple. So this one is going to be in purple. We have 0, 0, 2, 4, 4, 8, 6, 12. I'm going to do my best to make that a straight line. If you have a straight edge at home, I would suggest using that. Now I'll change my pen just so that we can see the difference in the lines, and I'm going to make this one green. I have 0, so that means I'm not moving on the x, and I'm just going up to 6. We read these numbers in the table as an ordered pair. So this is 2, up 10, over 4, up 14, and again, I am going to make my straight line. Okay? So give yourself a chance just to make sure that you have the tables filled in correctly and that your graph matches. If you used a different scale, meaning counted by different numbers, then it might look different, but you should still have positive straight lines that look similar to what I have here. Okay? So now let's take a look at the next slide. So here we have 3 lines, line A, line B, and line C. It says to name the y-intercept of each of the lines to the left. So let's take a look at line A. We know that the y-intercept is always going to be marked with a lowercase b, and the y-intercept is where the line intersects or crosses on the y-axis. So here is our y-axis, and now we're going to look to see where it crossed for each of our lines. So for line A, it's right at positive 5, so I'm going to put a 5 on the line. You can always represent this as an ordered pair, so the x for all three of these is going to be 0. We're not moving on the x, so I'm going to fill that in. And the y here is 5. Looking at line B, it's right at the origin, 0, 0. So I'm going to put 0 for my y-intercept, which is represented with the lowercase b, and the ordered pair would be 0, 0. For line C, it looks to be right in between -6 and -7. So that's going to be -6.5, and I'll fill that in as my ordered pair as well. Okay, so we just want to keep in mind the y-intercept is always marked as a lowercase b. That's how we recognize it. It's where it intersects on the y-axis. So now if we think back to the previous lessons that we've done where we talked about slope of a line, we know that slope is always represented as m, and we can find slope using rise over run. So keeping that in mind, let's go back to our graph and take a look at each line individually. Before I get started, something that I notice is that the lines are all in the direction going down. If I look at them from left to right, I see that they're going in a downward direction, which tells me that they're going to be negative. So if m equals, okay, and I know it's going to be negative because of the direction of the line, you can see it going down, I'm going to put my negative there before I start. I find 2 points that make sure they are right at the corners of the boxes. And I'm going to travel from one point to the next. Some of you might be used to drawing this slope triangle. You can also count the boxes. Just be careful because you can run into some problems here if you're counting too quickly or your pencil's moving faster than you're counting. So here we have 1, 2, and then across is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that would be 2, 6, and I see that this can be simplified to -1 over 3, and that negative symbol, you can keep it with the 2 because you had to go down for the 2. 2 boxes right here, down is negative, indicates negative, or you can leave it on the outside of the fraction. Now, if we look at the second example for line B, okay, we're going here. I'm going to travel down and across. 1, 2, 3. So again, it's down 3 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, this again can be simplified. 3 goes into itself once, 3 goes into 9 3 times. Okay, and you'll see even if you look at one of the other points on the line. So let's say we wanted to go from here to here. I draw my slope triangle. It's 2, so down 2, over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This can also be simplified to -1 over 3. Okay? So it doesn't matter which points you use as long as they're on the corner of the boxes. You don't want to pick one that's right in the middle. You should be able to simplify it to get the same answer. So now let's look at line C. Again, we're going down. Okay? And I'm going to go all the way down and then across. 1, 2, 3. So m equals, I have -3. Now let's count across. 1, 2, 3, 4, 14. Okay? And that one cannot be simplified, so we would leave it as is. m equals -3 over 14. And I'll just box these in so that you see them. You always want to make sure that you have it in the format of m equals, and you're using rise over run. So let's take a look at our checklist. So we know that slope-intercept form for the equation of a line, we have y equals mx plus b. So we're always going to want to use this format. The m represents our slope, and the m is always going to be in front of the x. The b, or the y-intercept, is always going to be the number that you see by itself. So whenever we're working with slope and y-intercept, it's helpful to put that at the top of your page. So here it says in this equation, different than the equation above, or excuse me, is it different than the equation above? If so, let's write the difference and explore what steps you must take to solve for the slope. Find the slope of the line. So this is where you would want to pause your video. I'll give you a chance to work on this one, and then we can go over it together. Okay, so before we get started with this question, let's take a look back at the previous slide. So here, okay, if we look, we want to refer to line A. So here we see that our slope is right here. So it's m equals, there's our slope. So if we wanted to write this in the format of y equals mx plus b, okay, here's our slope, the -1/3, so, excuse me, 1/3, so I'm going to plug that in. So we have y equals -1/3 x plus, and now the b is our y-intercept. So let's look back to the example at the bottom here where we found line A. Our y-intercept was 5, so we would plug in 5. So now what I've done was I took the slope and I took the y-intercept and I plugged it into the y equals mx plus b formula. So now let's keep that in mind when we look at this one at the bottom. So find the slope of the line. Is the slope here? Yes, we said that the slope, and if we look up at the example, is right here, always in front of the x. So y equals its slope, x. Now here is our y-intercept. So m, or our slope, is 4, and b, or our y-intercept, is -2. Okay, and that was all you had to do for that part right there. We just wanted to make sure that you were able to recognize the slope and the y-intercept. The number in front of the x is the slope, and the number that's alone is going to be your y-intercept. So now here are a few more examples that we can take a look at. Okay. You're going to identify the slope and the y-intercept for each line. So y equals mx plus b. The slope, they have it identified using red and the y-intercept in blue. So I'll keep it like that so that we can identify them easier. So here is our slope. So let's look at number 2. Where would I find my slope? In front of the x. What number is in front of the x? -4. Let's look at number 3. Here I don't see a number in front of the x. It's assumed to be a 1, so that would be my slope. Just the 1. And in example number 4, the half would be my slope. Because if we look at the format, the slope is the m, represented as m, always in front of the x. Now, if we look for our b, which is the y-intercept, it's the number that's by itself. Looking at number 1, what number is by itself? The 5. What number is by itself? The -5. In example number 3, what number is by itself? But when I get to number 4, I don't see any number by itself. This is going to be 0. When you don't see anything indicated for the y-intercept, you would assume it to be +0, or this would be 0. Okay, so you can just say here 0 or b equals 0. Let's take a look at the fast finisher. Y equals x. So if I need to identify my slope and my y-intercept, just like an example, number 3, we don't see a number in front of the x, but we always assume that the number in front of a variable is a 1. So that would be 1. And if we look back at example number 4, what would my y-intercept be? That's right, 0. Okay? So just to reiterate, we identified the slope using the red. I circled it in red. And for B, the y-intercept, I circled in blue. Okay, so this says, again, identify the slope and y-intercept of each. So this is where you would pause the video, make an attempt at these questions. We want them to be in the format of y equals mx plus b. When I look at numbers 1 and 2, they're not like that. I'm going to have to get the y by itself. So you're using your knowledge from the previous lesson where we need to rewrite equations, and we want to write this in the form of y equals mx plus b. Okay, so for number 1, you'll see I put up the work. In order to get the y by itself, we subtracted 5 from both sides, and that gave us y equals 2x plus 2. So now it's in the form of y equals mx plus b. My slope is always going to be the number that's in front of the x, and the y-intercept is the number that's by itself, so that would be positive 2. Now if we look at the next example, I see that the y is being multiplied by 3, so we want to get it by itself. Using inverse operations, we're going to divide by 3. Whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. This will cancel, okay, giving us 2x minus 4. Okay, and now looking at the last example, we're going to want to move 2x now we have 4y equals, now if we want it to look like y equals mx plus b, we can rewrite this by putting the negative 2x first. So what you're doing is you're rewriting this in order to have it most reflective of that y equals mx plus b format. Now, still we're trying to get the y by itself, so instead of multiplying by 4, I'm dividing everything by 4. This will cancel. And now I have y equals 1/2 x plus 3. Okay? And if you didn't rewrite it that way, and you wrote it as 4y equals 12 minus 2x, okay, you can still divide everything by 4. Okay? And then you would just move what you have. And you'll see it's the same. Okay? I think it's a good habit to get into rewriting right here like we did, just so that it's one less step, and that's how we're trying to get it in y equals mx plus b format. So now if I use this by rewriting, that's going to just, I think, make it easier for us. So here it says working with equations, find the slope and y-intercept. Okay. So So for the first part, if we have to find the slope, we'll identify that in red. The y-intercept we'll identify in blue. So let's look at the first example. We know that it's y equals mx plus b. If the slope is m, let's look at the example we have here. The number that is in front of the x is 3. The y-intercept, or the number that would be by itself, is negative 5. Now if we look at b, I see fractions, so this might look a little intimidating at first, but just break it down one step at a time. The number that's by itself is this 3/4. The slope, or what's in front of the x, would be 7/6. Okay, and it might be helpful if every example, you know, here's the m in front of the x. Okay, so here we have a plicker. We're not going to be doing plickers, but you can act as it is one and you can self-assess. It says to find the slope of the equation below. So this is where we're going to have you pause the video, make an attempt at this question. Okay? So to find the slope, y equals mx plus b. We want to get the y by itself. So in order to do that, I'm going to add 15 to both sides. Add 15 to both sides. This will cancel, and I have 5y equals, and again, I'm rewriting this. Okay, but we're not done yet because I still need to now divide everything by 5 in order to still get the y by itself. This is going to cancel, and I have y equals 3x plus 6. Okay, that's not my answer though. It's asking me to find the slope. So we're just looking for the slope. So your answer for this one should be C. I'll make it in a different color, too much red on the screen. It should be C. Okay. For your fast finisher, if you're finding the slope, which is going to be the number that's in front of the x, but then what would the y-intercept be? Think back to a few slides. Maybe it was the second slide where we had to identify slope and y-intercept. If there is nothing there, then it's going to be 0. Okay? The equation of a linear function is as follows. Negative 6x plus 3y equals 18. John tells Gary that the slope of the linear equation is negative 6. Is John correct? And justify your answer. So we know that the slope of a line is in the format of y equals mx plus b, and you're probably going to hear me say that 100 times today. Okay? So John says that it's negative 6. Is that true? I see the negative 6. It's with the x. But is it in the format of y equals mx plus b? Doesn't look like it. So I'm going to say he's not correct, but now we need to justify our answer. So in order to do that, we're going to have to get this in the form of y equals mx plus b. So in order to do that, we need to get the y by itself. So we're going to add 6x to both sides. We'll bring down 3y equals, now remember, we rewrite this so that it looks like mx plus b, so 6x plus 18. You want to write the number that's with the x first. Then I divide everything by 3. I'll just write it under here. So this would be y equals 2x plus 6. So now looking back at the conversation between John and Gary, John tells Gary that the slope of the linear equation above is -6. Is that true? No, that is not true. And we just justified our answer by rewriting it as y equals mx plus b. So the slope here is 2. Okay? And you could even just rewrite that here so that you can have your answer right next to it. Okay? Find the slope and the y-intercept, which we did. We said that the slope was 2, and the y-intercept, the number that's by itself, is going to be 6. Okay? So it says, write the equation of a line. Mary wants to graph the linear function that has a slope of 4 and a y-intercept of 8. Write the equation of the line so that Mary can graph it on a coordinate grid. So if the slope is going to be 4, okay, and I'm taking that right from the problem, and the y-intercept is 8, so I'm going to fill that in here. Now I'm going to take the slope and the y-intercept. We know that it's going to be y equals, so let's fill that in. Our m, or our slope, is 4x plus, and what was our y-intercept? 8. So Frank wants to graph the linear function that has a slope of 1/2 and a y-intercept of -6. So I'll give you a second to try this one on your own. Okay. So we would have y equals 1/2 x minus 6. And for the last one, this is your fast finisher. Find the equation of a line that has a slope of 4 and a y-intercept of 0. So our slope is 4, so that's 4x. And now we talked about this in the previous slides. When our y-intercept is 0, we can simply leave it like this. Okay, here's another clicker. We're just going to go through this together. It says, what is the equation of a line with a slope? So here's the slope of 5 and a y-intercept of -2. So give yourself a second. Okay, so let's take a look at this clicker together. What is the equation of a line with a slope of 5? So let's start with that. If I refer to y equals mx plus b that I have on the side, I know that the slope is always going to be with the x, the number that's in front of the x. They told us that it has to be a 5. So immediately, I'm eliminating answer choices C and D. D has a slope of -2, and C has a slope of 2. So that can't be my answer. So now we have a 50-50 chance of getting this question correct. So A and B both have slopes of 5, but the y-intercept, the number by itself, has to be -2. So therefore, your answer is going to be B. Okay? So now you're just going to do some practice where you find the slope and y-intercept for each equation. It says student choice and that you're going to self-assess. We're going to have you work through all of these questions just as practice, and then I will put the answer key up for you to check over it. I won't go through each and every question. I just think that that would be a little too repetitive for you. So right now I have numbers 1 through 9 up. I'll pause the video and you're going to work through these, and then I'll walk you through 1 or 2 of them, and then I'll give you the answers. Okay? So let's take a look at number 1 together. So before we get started, I'm always going to put this at the top of my page. And I think it would be safe for you to do the same. Ugh, running out of room. Okay? So for number 1, we need to get the y by itself. So I'm going to have to move that x, that -x. We know that when there's no number in front of the variable, we assume it to be a 1. So I'm going to plus, or add x to both sides. These will cancel, leaving me with 2y equals, and now remember, we said it might be easiest to rewrite this. Okay. Oh, 1 second, the screen is, okay. So now we're going to rewrite this as x minus 20. Now we're going to divide everything by 2. This will cancel, and you'll be left with y equals half x plus 10. Okay. Looking at number 2, you would add 3x to both sides, leaving 2y equals 3x plus 6. Divide everything by 2, divide everything by 2. This would be y equals 3 over 2x plus 3. Okay? And you would just leave the fraction as 3 over 2. You're not going to make mixed numbers, you're just leaving it as is, and we're not going to make it a decimal because we need to remember that this relates to graphing. So it might, and that's our rise over our run, okay? So we're going to leave that as a fraction. So for number 7, I'm just going to put the work up for this one. Okay. And for number 8, you're adding 2. Adding 2. I'm kind of bouncing around from the numbers just so that I want to make sure I have enough space. Oops, can't forget that. Okay. Just going to scroll up. Okay, number 3, we're going to add 5x. Add 5x. This would be 2y equals 5x plus 6. Divide by 2, divide by 2. Okay, and this would be y equals 5 over 2x plus 3. Okay, I'll pause the video here so that you can continue working, and then I'm going to put up the answers for 4, 5, 10, and 11. Okay, so if you'll see, I put up some more of the work and answers. So just make sure that you're self-assessing. If you see that you made a mistake, just make sure that you're checking your work. Hopefully you're able to identify your mistakes. If you have a question, you can always send us a message. If there's one in particular that wasn't clear and you wanted to go over it again, you would just need to let us know. Okay? Number 11, I wanted to go over with you because looking at this, you might not know how to get started. So the goal here is still to get the y by itself. In order to do that, I need to move that x. So that x, it's assumed to be positive when there is no sign in front of it. So I'm going to have to subtract x from both sides, leaving me with negative y equals, and then I have negative x plus 15. It may appear like I have the y by itself, but it still has a negative attached to it. So this y is being multiplied by this negative. I need to divide everything by a negative to get rid of it. So now I would have y equals, and be careful here. You have 2 negatives, so this would be a positive x. Negative 15 divided by a negative, it would stay as a negative, and that would give you negative 15. Okay, that one was probably one of the trickier ones. Not so tricky once we talk about it together, but that might have been hard to get started because we didn't see one that looks like that yet. Here, this one is similar to the previous examples, and 5 always seems to be a pretty popular number. I have 3y equals 5x minus 9. I'm dividing everything by 3. And I have y equals 5/3 x minus 3. Okay? And if you needed more room to solve each equation, you would copy it onto loose leaf, and then you can just do your work on loose leaf. I know it was kind of small space, even for me. Okay? This, unfortunately, is a little difficult for us to do because it's peer work, but we can look at it individually. It says copy each equation and solve for the slope and y-intercept. You can kind of assess yourself when you do this. So the first thing we're going to need to do is get it in the format of y equals mx plus b. So pause your video now, give yourself a second. Okay, so for these two examples, you'll see that I have the work up, and at the bottom here, I've identified the slope and the y-intercept, the slope and the y-intercept. At the bottom, where you're doing that tag strategy, we're just going to disregard that for now. Okay, and this is the mid-lesson summary. We're just going to pause here. We won't go over this together. Just what are 3 takeaways that you need in order to identify the slope and the y-intercept? So think about how we want it to be in the format of y equals mx plus b, how we want to get the y by itself, and you can elaborate on that and fill this out, or you can come back to this. Okay, and that's going to be all for this part of the lesson. So just make sure that you fill in all of your notes, check your answers against the video, take pictures of it, and then you're going to submit that to us.